The fastest way to make a player obsessed with you is to make them think they're the one in control. Let them think they're seducing you. Let them believe you're the one falling. And while they're busy playing checkers, you're playing war. Because here's the truth. Players aren't smart. They're predictable. They use the same tactics on everyone: disappear, reappear, compliment, withdraw, confuse, reward. It's not charisma, it's psychology. Specifically, intermittent reinforcement, the same system used by casinos and dopamine-addicted rats in Skinner's 1950s lab experiments. They keep you guessing, and that guessing spikes your dopamine harder than a steady love ever could. But here's where most people mess up. They try to fight emotion with emotion. They beg for closure. They try to prove their worth. They become the lab rat. And that's when the player wins. Not because they're better, but because they stay colder. This game isn't about love. It's about who can stay emotionally detached the longest. So how do you beat someone like that? You don't try to be nicer. You become more calculated. You make the player fall in love by becoming the one person who doesn't need them. You bait the hook with intrigue. You trigger their ego. You reward them just enough, then disappear without flinching. It's not about ghosting. It's about control. And no one teaches this better than Machiavelli, the man who literally wrote the handbook on how to manipulate rulers, armies, and enemies without ever lifting a sword. His philosophy? Men are driven by two things: fear and gain. If you control both, you win. In modern terms, make a player feel like they're gaining your heart. Then make them fear losing it, without ever confirming they had it in the first place. Because the moment a player realizes they're emotionally invested, it's over. They either implode or they chase hard. This video isn't about healing. It's about reversing the psychological mechanics of seduction. And then you walk away, not because you're heartbroken, but because you were never playing to keep them. You were playing to prove you could win without trying. Let's begin. Let's get this straight. A player doesn't fall for love. They fall for the illusion of control, and that's exactly where you trap them. But most people do the opposite. They get caught chasing the highs. They try to decode mixed signals like it's some secret love language. They confuse chaos for chemistry and think unpredictability means depth. Wrong. That chaos is just a psychological trick. Intermittent reinforcement. It's the same reason people get addicted to slot machines, toxic bosses, and bad texting habits. In the 1950s, B.F. Skinner ran an experiment where rats pressed a lever to get food. Some got food every time, some only got food randomly. The result? The random ones became obsessed. They kept pressing, even when there was nothing left. Sound familiar? That's exactly what the player does. They give you a taste, a good morning text, a night of eye contact, a shared vulnerability. Then they vanish. Then they come back. And your brain, it spikes dopamine harder than if they were consistent. That's the trap. Not their charm. Your nervous system. Now here's where it gets dangerous. Players don't just exploit chemistry. They exploit ego. They want you to prove yourself. They want you to compete for their attention. They want to stay slightly out of reach, because once they're fully available, they lose leverage, and they know it. So you start negotiating with your own standards. You start justifying crumbs. You romanticize their inconsistency and call it mystery. You think, if I'm just patient enough, they'll finally see how loyal I am. But loyalty doesn't make a player fall in love. Unpredictability does. Power does. Certainty, in the right doses, destroys them. Here's what nobody tells you. Players don't expect to be played. They expect to be chased, They've built their entire strategy around being the emotional prize, the thing you're supposed to want, unlock, and keep. That's why most people fail, because they go into the situation thinking they need to impress the player, convert them, win them over. Wrong game. You want them obsessed? You don't mirror their inconsistency. You build curiosity, then reward effort, but only on your terms. You give them access, then deny validation. You create the illusion that they're finally winning, and then you pull away first. Why does it work? Because underneath the ego, most players are insecure control freaks. They've mastered the art of seeming detached because they fear being vulnerable. They build fake power through distance, not substance. So when you stay emotionally calm, unfazed and uninvested, they short-circuit. Machiavelli would have loved this. He said, "The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world is composed of the vulgar." Translation: give people the performance they're already addicted to, then shift the ending. Make them think they're in control. Make them feel like you're the one who fell. And just when they start to relax, you exit. Not with drama, not with closure, with silence, precision, timing, because the real punishment isn't losing you. It's realizing they never had you and that you were the one controlling the game the entire time. And the more they replay it, the deeper the obsession goes. This isn't about revenge. It's about discipline, power, mastery. Most people never get to this level. They either fall in love or try to out-toxic the player. But if you understand the rules of psychology and you don't flinch, you win without ever breaking a sweat. Now that we've broken down why the player is vulnerable and how they're not as smart as they think, let's get surgical. You don't outplay a player by becoming colder. You outplay them by becoming calculated. Here's your blueprint. Not emotional revenge, not chaotic drama, surgical control. Because once you know the wiring behind the behavior, the rest is execution. Step 1. Control the frame, early. Players operate in one frame. I'm the prize. You're lucky to have my attention. So your job is to destroy that silently, not with words, but with behavior. Never ask where it's going. Never try to define the connection. Never react to the mixed signals. Instead, stay neutral, elusive, curious, but unmoved. Psychology calls this secure detachment, the ability to connect without clinging. It triggers the player's ego faster than any flirtation, because now they're unsure if you're even playing. And uncertainty makes the hunter hunt harder. Step 2. Flip intermittent reinforcement on them. This is where it gets fun. Players manipulate using unpredictable rewards, affection, attention, validation. So you flip it. Reward action, not words. Compliments? Meh. But if they make effort, you smile, lean in, engage. Ghost you? Go emotionally blank. Show up again. Be kind, but colder than before. No punishment, no explanation, just shift the vibe. This triggers what's known as reactance, a psychological pushback when someone feels their influence is slipping. Suddenly they're working for your validation, and they don't know why. Step 3. Give just enough depth. Most people try to play the player by becoming equally shallow. That never works. It becomes a void competition. Instead, give controlled vulnerability, just enough to make them think they've unlocked something no one else gets. Tell them something real, then pivot. This creates what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, unfinished emotional business. It makes people obsess over what wasn't resolved. You give them a piece of you, then vanish before the next piece comes. Now their brain starts building the rest, fantasizing, projecting, wanting more. Step 4. Maintain mystery, not confusion. Players use confusion. You use clarity, wrapped in mystery. Here's how. Be clear with your time, boundaries, and lifestyle. 3. But stay vague about your emotions and intentions. Let them see your routine is full. Let them know you're not waiting on texts. Let them wonder what you're really thinking. Psychologically, this taps into scarcity bias. Things seem more valuable when we can't fully access them. The difference. You don't play hard to get. You are hard to get because your life is already full. And the player? They hate being the one chasing. Step 5. Set the emotional trap, then leave before it closes. By now, they're emotionally invested. They won't admit it, but the signs are there. They initiate more. They subtly test your interest. They bring up us in future terms. That's your cue. Let the moment build. Let them think they've finally cracked your walls. Then you exit. Not with drama, not with closure, with elegant detachment. Why? Because leaving after you've given them what they wanted, but before they've fully secured it, triggers the deepest psychological hook, loss aversion. Studies in behavioral economics show that people are more affected by loss than by equivalent gain. You gave them intimacy. Then you took it away. Now they're not just missing you, they're haunted by the version of themselves they became while chasing you. And that kind of fall? It lasts. The secret weapon. You never needed them. This whole strategy only works if it's grounded in truth. You can't fake indifference. You have to actually mean it. You have to know from the start that the point of the game wasn't to keep them. It was to prove that you were never under their control. That's what breaks them. Because players don't fall for nice people. They don't fall for mirror games. They fall for someone who doesn't flinch. And once you walk away with no explanation, no drama, no emotional leakage, they'll obsess over you for one reason. You were the first person who didn't play their game. You redesigned it. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life. Because people here make a player fall in love and think it's some dramatic soap opera seduction. It's not. It's subtle, calculated, and 90% of it is psychological tension the player creates for themselves because you don't bite. Here's a case study from dating research. In 2013, a behavioral study on romantic uncertainty found that people rated potential partners as more attractive when they were less sure whether the person liked them back. Translation: uncertainty increases desire, not compliments, not gifts. Uncertainty. But here's the twist most people miss. Uncertainty only works when the person has ego to protect. That's why this entire strategy works best on players. They're not used to working for attention. They're used to controlling it. So when they finally meet someone who doesn't chase, doesn't flinch, and doesn't ask for validation, they start to question their own relevance. And that questioning, that's the beginning of obsession. Pop culture example. Let's break it down with a famous scene. The Wolf of Wall Street. Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a textbook player. Money, charm, manipulation. Women throw themselves at him and he stays cold. Then comes Naomi, played by Margot Robbie. Stunning, confident, unbothered. She doesn't chase. She doesn't flinch when he flexes. She controls the frame, controls the pace, and only rewards effort. When she finally lets him in, he's hooked fast. Why? Because she never gave him the reaction he was used to. She didn't play defense, she made him earn offense. And then once he fell, she walked away from the power games entirely. That's the key. You're not trying to out-manipulate. You're making them exhaust their tactics on you, and when nothing works, they're left exposed. You ever notice how the startups that beg investors rarely get funded? But the ones that say we only have room for one more investor Take it or leave it. They get the deal fast. Same psychology, scarcity, value, confidence. Players are like bad investors. They love deals where they hold the leverage. But the moment they feel they're being evaluated instead of being worshipped, their identity fractures. Because underneath the tactics, most players are driven by a fear they'll never admit. They fear being irrelevant. So what do? You give them attention in doses. You show interest, but never need. You let them talk. Then you make them feel like the audition never ended. That's the power reversal. Here's where people blow it. They feel the player start to open up, and they get excited. They think, it's working, they're changing. And boom, they give it all away. Emotional availability, full access, text replies, clarity. But here's what you need to remember. Players don't fall for love. They fall for someone who's immune to needing them. The second you seek emotional security from them, the power's gone. The dynamic resets. Instead, you let them ask the questions. You let them spiral a little. Are we good? Where do you see this going? Just wanted to check in. That's how you know the trap closed. The player has become the chaser, and they have no idea how it happened. Even therapists get played, but strategic people don't. Want to hear something dark? In relationship therapy circles, there's a term for this exact dynamic, the manipulator collapse. It happens when someone who relies on control tactics suddenly encounters someone who doesn't respond the way they expect. They can't create chaos. They can't bait a reaction. They can't trigger guilt. So their internal world, which was built on manipulation working, starts to crumble. They either evolve or they panic. And if they panic, they'll chase harder. Not out of love, out of ego repair. And that's when you leave. Not because you're cold, but because you already won. The only move left is exit. Let's get clinical. You want to understand why this works? You have to understand how the brain handles power, rejection, and control. Because when a player falls, it's not romantic. It's biochemical. And the person who triggers that fall is usually the one who never asked for love in the first place. 1. The brain craves closure, and you deny it. A player's entire strategy is built on them controlling the pacing. They disappear when they want. They reappear when they need attention. They're used to being the cliffhanger, the mystery that drives you crazy. But when you become the one who ends the story abruptly, they enter what's called a Zeigarnik loop. In psychology, the Zeigarnik effect refers to the brain's obsession with unfinished tasks. It creates mental tension, a loop that keeps replaying because it didn't get resolution. In dating terms, they'll check your Instagram 10 times a day. They'll remember the last thing you said. They'll replay the moment you pulled away and wonder if they missed something. You gave them no ending, and that drives their ego insane. 2. Dopamine withdrawal. Feels like loss. When players are in control, their brain gets rewarded. Little dopamine hits every time someone reacts, texts, begs for clarity. But when you stop giving those responses, the reward system collapses. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, a Stanford neuroendocrinologist, found that dopamine spikes more from anticipation than reward, meaning it's not even about getting you, it's about the chase. And when the chase ends early, when you remove the possibility of a win, they go into dopamine withdrawal. Not figuratively, literally. Same brain region as a cocaine come-down. They feel the absence of your attention as loss, even if they never respected it while they had it. And humans are wired to avoid loss at all costs. Which brings us to 3. Loss. Aversion plus ego equals spiral. In behavioral economics, loss aversion is the idea that losing something hurts more than gaining it ever feels good. A player rarely fears losing people because they never believe they had to earn them. But when you make them feel like they won you and then remove it, that's where the obsession starts. Their brain doesn't just miss you. It panics. It starts rewriting history to justify the loss. Maybe they were different. Why did they pull away? Did I mess it up? Now they're chasing the idea of you, not just the person. And that chase is what they usually inflict on others. You've reversed the emotional trauma loop without raising your voice, without ever needing revenge. 4. You activated their hidden fear. Irrelevance. At their core, most players are not evil. They're afraid. Afraid of being vulnerable. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being forgettable. So they create power through tactics. They confuse you to feel superior. They withdraw to punish. They flirt with others to inflate scarcity. But when they meet someone who doesn't react, someone who's genuinely unbothered, that fear gets exposed. And now, instead of feeding their ego, you've triggered their existential insecurity. What if I'm not actually desirable? What if they saw through me? What if I was never in control? This is why emotional indifference is more powerful than emotional revenge. Because players expect pushback. They know how to fight. What they don't know how to handle is silence. 5. Walking away becomes the power play. Most people think walking away is weak. They want to give one last speech, one final text, one dramatic moment that says, "I'm done." That's emotional closure, and players feed on it. But if you walk without fanfare, without a scene, and stay gone, you've done what no one else has. You denied them the final word. You denied them the satisfaction of a breakdown. You denied them relevance. And now they're stuck in the worst emotional loop of all, replaying a loss they can't explain. This is why players stay obsessed with the one person who didn't need them. Not because of love, because of unfinished control. And that's the difference between being remembered and being replayed. So you made the player fall. You flipped the psychology. You controlled the pace, triggered their obsession, and walked away clean. But here's the part no one talks about. What happens next? Because power isn't just about flipping the script once. It's about becoming the kind of person who never gets pulled into weak games again. The kind of person whose value is so internalized they don't need to react to chaos. They cause silence when they leave. Here's how you stay there. 1. Resist the test message trap. After you walk, you'll get baited. A casual hey, a fake emergency, a meme you once shared, a subtle birthday wish. It's not affection. It's a probe. They want to know if they still have access. If you respond, even politely, you reopen the loop. You tell them, you still matter. Don't. Psychologically, this is known as breadcrumbing, minimal emotional investment to maintain psychological access. If you respond, they win. But if you ignore it completely, you become a ghost that haunts their strategy. And that's a punishment no speech can match. 2. Detach from the fantasy you created. Let's be honest, part of why players get inside your head is because you wrote a fantasy script. You thought you could be the exception, that you were the one they'd finally commit to, that your loyalty would heal their dysfunction. It won't. You were never playing with an equal. You were entertaining a power imbalance that only worked when you stayed confused. So when you leave the fantasy too. Don't mourn what could have been. Mourn the fact that you ever thought you had to prove yourself to someone that emotionally unavailable. That version of you deserves to be buried. 3. Build a life so full. Players feel like downgrades. The best revenge isn't another relationship. It's a lifestyle so sovereign, so intentional, that emotionally chaotic people feel like clutter. Here's how you know you've grown. You start rejecting people who feel inconsistent without explanation. You stop giving potential more credit than patterns. You don't chase, you observe. You don't fantasize, you vet. And the players, they can feel it. They sense when they've lost access to your emotional bandwidth, not because you became colder, but because you became unavailable to confusion. 4. Remember, power is not cruelty, it's clarity. This strategy wasn't about being toxic. It was about reclaiming the power that most people hand over in the name of love. You didn't play the player out of malice. You did it because their tactics only work on people who need something from them. You needed nothing. You wanted nothing. You observed. You adapted. You walked. And that's terrifying to someone who built their worth on being wanted. Let them sit with that. 5. Embody the unreachable energy. Quietly, the final move? Say nothing. For me, no story time. No public post. No healing journey for the audience. You just live better, stronger, quieter, focused. Because here's what breaks a player permanently. It's not that you left. It's that you never looked back. That's what separates emotional performers from real strategists. Players rehearse desire. You became a lesson. And that kind of impact, it doesn't fade. It echoes. Final thought. Most people play to be loved. Players play to be worshipped. But you played to never have to play again. You don't just flip the script. You burn the script and write a life so intentional, no one dares improvise on your stage again. Now walk, and don't turn around. Because the real flex isn't breaking them. It's becoming someone so emotionally intelligent, no one gets a second chance to confuse you. Ever again.